This podcast is brought to you by lineupmedia.fm.
You know what they say about one bad apple? Well, we've got two. It's American Animals. All your favorite athletes, entertainers, and weirdos are coming to you like you've never heard them before. Join Erik, Bad Apple, and Ian, Uncle Creepy McCall. American Animals. Get some.
Today's show is presented by Da Vinci Smart Drink. Order yours now at lineupmedia.fm/Da Vinci. Da Vinci. Excite better thinking.
Need a mental boost? Da Vinci Smart Drinks were designed with professional thinkers in mind. With key ingredients shown to improve cognitive function and increase mental energy, Da Vinci Smart Drinks excite better thinking. Drink a Da Vinci. Let it go to your head.
Welcome to American Animals. That's right, episode number 30. It's like I don't know, what is the 30th anniversary? I can't think. There's 25 silver, there's gold, there's diamond. I don't think 30 means shit, but this is it.
Sweet.
This is it. You're hanging out, as always, with Erik Apple, your host. My co-host, Ian McCall, is still not doing so well. We'll talk about all that stuff later. He's not feeling hot. He's not going to be in here, but guess what? I've got a co-host, a guest, and future sponsor of the show, Richard Wilner, joining us. Richard, thanks for coming to hang out with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I was looking forward to seeing Ian, but I'm sorry he's not here.
We'll get into more of that stuff with Ian later, but he's obviously couldn't fight this past weekend, UFC 208. He's having some serious medical issues, and it might be something more than just not be able to fight for that week. But Richard, you're going to be a co-host for me. We're going to talk about all kinds of MMA happenings the last 2 weeks. We're going to preview some fights, which you can certainly do because you know the sport very well. And we're going to get into some other stuff because you are one of the most well-known and most established immigration attorneys here on the West Coast. And man, a lot of stuff going on in the news this week with our new president and his immigration reforms and policies. A lot of great stuff to talk about, and I couldn't think of a better guest this week.
I appreciate that and the vote of confidence. We can certainly get into it and talk about it and hopefully help educate, for lack of a better word, the listeners and not believe in the hype. Yeah.
Well, educate's a good word. There's no better word than that. We're here to educate and entertain. That's one of our show mottos. What's going on this last week, man? Again, our co-host Ian made weight at UFC 208. He's fighting Jared Brooks, who was a UFC newcomer who was filling in for Ian's original opponent, Neil Seary. Ian, after making weight, he couldn't hold any food or any liquids down. He's throwing up, having all kinds of problems. I'm sure next week he'll be back and he'll be able to explain to the fans, both his fans and our fans, exactly what's going on with him. But I know that at one point, Richard, they thought he had gallstones and kidney stones, and they were about to do an emergency surgery because he was in so much pain. Then they did some kind of other advanced testing, and then they changed their mind and didn't think he had those kinds of stones. Could you imagine getting cut open for something like that? And they're like, oh, we were wrong.
Our bad. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Ian's brother, that happened to him, Brad McCall.
Same thing.
Who also fights. They thought he was having appendicitis. And they cut him open, took out his appendix. They're like, oh, we were wrong. You were fine.
Wow.
It's a pretty big deal. But and again, that's one of those things. They're doing the best they can. They're
trying to figure it out.
Yeah. What are they going to do? I don't think they just were bored. But Richard, what's going on with you this week?
This week's been busy. Last week's been busy since President Trump became president. Even before, our phones have been ringing off the hook and people coming in crazy. Our market, the firm that I'm part owner in, which is called Wilner and O'Reilly, our business, for one reason or another, doesn't really pertain to people from the 7 countries that were on the banned list. And we can get into that a little bit more later.
Yeah.
However, others who aren't citizens of the United States for again, one reason or another, are scared and fearful and worried that even though they've been a green card holder for 20 years and happen to be from New Zealand, that they're going to get deported. It's crazy. But it is what it is.
It's literally hysteria.
It is. Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to think about all this stuff and how people they watch the news and there's literal hysteria going on and people are hitting the panic button. Man, we have been doing so well, Ian and I out here training the last couple of weeks. I've been training again. I'm thinking about fighting again. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a Muay Thai fight this summer.
Nice.
I'm 37 years old, so I better do it before it's too late, right?
Do it.
I'm getting up there.
Do it. You're ready.
You know, I got 13 pro MMA fights. I'm 10-3. I like to think I'm a pretty proficient stand-up fighter, so I'd like to do a Muay Thai fight just to be able to say, yeah, I did a pro Muay Thai fight. I'd also like to do a pro boxing fight.
I think you should do both.
Yeah, I'd like to do one of each just to be able to say I did it. So I've been training at Ruka in the mornings. When I told I know we talked about Jason Perillo over there, and man, Perillo's got a lot of stuff going. A lot of guys coming in there.
Busy
now.
guy.
Guys and girls, I should say. Mm-hmm. We got to get you over there in the mornings. Also at nighttime, I'm training with Tyler Wombles, a classic fight team.
Love Tyler. Known Tyler for a long time.
Tyler's a great kid,
Yeah.
and his gym's getting busy. He's getting ready to expand and take over the place next door.
Awesome.
So we're having a pretty good time over here until Ian got hurt this last week.
Keep him busy. Busy's good.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry to everyone, because we've been off the last 2 weeks here at American Animals because Ian was getting ready for his fight, and then we also had our studio flooded the week before. But we're back. We got our new sponsor here sitting in front of us. We got another new sponsor starting March 1st. We'll be back on our weekly program and giving you guys great content. I know you guys are excited to see us. Make sure you guys find us on @2AmericanAnimals. That's a number 2 American Animals. That's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Also, we have our new YouTube channel, which is 2 American Animals, and it's kind of hard. I didn't even know all these YouTube rules and regulations, but we actually got our own YouTube URL, youtube.com/American Animals, which is, like I said, it's like they don't just give that to anyone. I had to jump through all kinds of hoops, but I actually was able to figure it out. And it's funny because I really wasn't paying attention to YouTube. And I'll tell you this, Richard, there's a lot of channels on YouTube that carry MMA content, like podcasts like our own, right? And a lot of these channels have millions and millions of views a month. Wow. And I was seeing on these channels, they were taking me and Ian's content, and some of them have 50, 60, 70,000 views in like a couple days or a week of me talking. This is someone else's channel. I was like, whoa.
The idea was born.
Yeah, I should be doing that. Like, what the fuck? Like, that needs to be my channel.
Right.
I mean, you really think about it in the world of YouTube, if you have 50, 60, 70,000 views and you have 10 videos a month doing that,
that's a lot of views.
That's a business. Mm-hmm. That's a legit business. You're making money. So we just launched our YouTube channel. We're going to be building that and expanding it here in the near future. We're going to be filming our show starting next week. I'm looking at the cameras right now. We have 2 right now. I think I'm going to bring in a 3rd or a 4th. So we'll have 1 on each host, 1 on our guest, and maybe 1 for the whole room. Maybe even 1 for TJ or Lindsay over here. Would you be okay? You have to brush your hair though. You have to do something. And Ian and I we'll have some eye candy in the background. We'll have our girls and stuff here. We'll just put a bunch of pressure on them, telling them not.
Why'd I come today instead of next week?
You know what?
Damn.
It worked out though. I'm telling you.
Meant to be.
Okay, so we're gonna come back in a couple minutes. We're gonna go over UFC 208. We're gonna talk about all of our MMA news. There's a lot of news going down this week. We're gonna preview UFC Fight Night, and we're gonna talk about the Bellator card that's coming up here pretty soon. Fedor versus Matt Mitrione. So stay tuned. We'll be back here in just a minute on American Animals. Welcome back to American Animals, episode number 30, hanging out with Erik Apple and Richard Wilner. Richard, lots of stuff going on the last week. Did you get a chance to watch in person? Did you watch UFC 208?
Not in person. I wasn't at the fights, but...
Well, you know what I mean. I'm sorry. Did you watch it live?
I did.
You did? Okay.
And I even watched a replay.
You did?
I did.
Wow.
On accident.
How'd you do that on accident? Okay, let's talk about some of the fights. We saw Ryan LaFleur defeated Ron Carnero. Relatively not too exciting, kind of a boring fight. Philip Nover, I mean, man, that's a guy who was really, they had a lot of excitement about him. He lost to Rick Glenn, nothing really standing out there. Nick Lentz also lost to Islam Makhachev. Not too exciting there. Another guy we know, Wilson Hayes. You know Wilson? Wilson, yeah. Wilson's a jiu-jitsu world champion, man. He's been fighting for quite a while.
Ever since, yeah. Been in the game a long time.
Yeah, he was a Elite XC champion, I believe, back on Showtime. I actually fought on the same card as him up at Chumash Casino, and he was the main event. He defeated Ulka Sasaki. And that was did you see that fight? A real game Japanese kid, the tall Japanese kid.
Yeah, that was a good fight.
He was pretty exciting. He was pretty exciting. Bilal Muhammad defeated Randy Brown via decision. Let's move on. Now let's get some more exciting fights. Dustin Poirier and Jim Miller.
Like that fight?
I did like that fight. I think that fight won fight of the night.
It did.
And that was the fight that Dana was like, thank fucking God for Dustin Poirier and Jim Miller.
The card.
Because the card was pretty boring. And I really thought Jim Miller would do better.
Me too. He's exciting to watch and always brings it.
Well, Dustin Poirier, remember he was going down to 45 for a while. He fought Conor at 45. So he's not the biggest 55er. Jim Miller's a pretty big 55er.
Right.
And Jim Miller is just a scrappy, tough, he's one of those guys who's like always in the fight no matter who he's fighting. You can't, there's nobody that would ever look at Jim Miller and go, that's an easy fight. He's always a tough dude.
Agreed.
One judge had that fight a draw. Another judge had 30-27 for Dustin Poirier, which explains, and we could talk more about that later, but man, the judges in New York having some tough times, and the officials.
I don't know how they do it. I don't know how someone scores one a draw and the other 30-27 rounds. And yeah, you're right. Those other fights were. Yeah,
it's pretty hard when someone says the fight's a draw and then one judge says, no, this guy won all 3 rounds.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's difficult when they're not all on the same page. Man, the state of New York, between their officials and the judges, and some of their issues with suspensions and that kind of stuff, man, they're really having some, they really got to get some things straightened out over there.
I don't know what's going on over there, but you'd think it wouldn't be like that.
Well, they're the last state to be on board as far as sanctioning mixed martial arts. So they're kind of late in the game. Let's hope they get it figured out. Let's move on. Glover Teixeira and Jared Cannonier. Have you seen Jared Cannonier fight before?
No, but I've watched Glover fight a bunch of times.
Glover, we all know and love. Glover's a real tough dude. Great stand-up, great wrestler. And that Jared Cannonier dude, I don't know if you saw his fights. He had a couple fights at heavyweight, and he put dudes down at heavyweight like
wow.
Bad.
No, I never saw him fight.
He hurt some feelings, let me tell you. He was knocking people dead. I think Glover got hurt pretty bad in that in the first round. And Glover just went, okay, well,
time to end it.
I don't want to play with you as far as standing up because you might get me, but I know I can out-wrestle you all day long. And Glover just wrestled like a savage and just rode him all day long. It's interesting. You don't see many Brazilians other than one that we know, Babalu. Not many Brazilians win fights with their wrestling.
Yeah, pure wrestling.
And Glover just dominated with wrestling. Let's take another step. Jacare and Tim Boetsch, which was a dangerous fight for Jacare.
I thought it was going to be a little bit different than the way it went down. I thought Jacare would win. I thought it would take a little bit longer.
Jacare is one of those guys that if he gets, side mount, you're done. You're pretty done. The guy has wins over, the best Gracies in the world. He's a former world champion, open weight world champion, right?
Yeah, first time I ever saw Jacare compete was at a jiu-jitsu event against Hodger Gracie.
And he's beaten Hodger Gracie,
He beat Hodger that event. That was probably...
They've gone back and forth?
Correct. That was in probably 2000. And Jacare had... Hodger Gracie had hyperextended. I thought it was broken, but he hyperextended Jacare's arm in an armbar. And Jacare competed in the rest of the match, and I might be recalling it a little bit incorrectly because it's been a while. But Jacare kept his hyperextended arm in his belt, tucked in his belt for the rest of the match, and was strategic in avoiding getting taken down and submitted, but ended up winning.
Jacare won.
Jacare won
on points.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that reminds me of a story. Have you ever heard of Hickson
Gracie
tucking his arms in his belt and just going through a room of people?
Yeah, letting people choke him.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen it in person. It's really sad. It's really embarrassing.
Yeah.
And I told him no.
Special.
He was like, "You want to come?" I was like, "No, I'm not letting you embarrass me, motherfucker. I ain't doing that shit. I'm not stupid." So yeah, Jacare able to beat Tim Boetsch pretty decisively in the first round, 3 minutes 40 seconds. And Tim Boetsch is a dude who he throws. He can catch you. And man, could you imagine how it's not much to gain and a lot to lose for Jacare?
Absolutely.
And Jacare, a lot of people think he's deserving of a title shot, and I'm one of those people. It's funny, after the fight, he's like, Bisping stopped running, Rockhold stopped running.
Right. What's this? I think I heard or read that he has the longest string of wins without an actual title fight. Something to that effect. Point being, I think I could be wrong, but
well, you mean
I agree that
title
he's
fight in
deserving.
the UFC or title
Correct.
fight at all? Because
UFC.
Yeah, he's never had a title fight there. I mean, he did lose to Yoel Romero in that close fight, remember?
That's right.
And that fight could have gone either way. But he's 24-4 overall. He does have a couple losses. He's won 2 fights in a row. He beat Vitor and Tim Boetsch. Before that, yeah, he won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in a row. But not against a lot of really big guys. He beat Kamosi. He beat Gegard Mousasi, who's another real tough middleweight. That's a guy who I really think is going to change some stuff up in the middleweight division. I mean, we talk about it all the time. I love Michael Bisping, but I think he's got a whole list of troubles in front of him. Looking at Romero, looking at Jacare, looking at Mousasi. Those are all dudes that are dangerous for Bisping.
Absolutely.
Real tough for him to fight. And you remember Jacare was the champion at Strikeforce at one point. I believe he lost that belt to Luke Rockhold. Yes, he lost that belt to Luke Rockhold. So there you go. Moving on that card after we saw Jacare beat Tim Boetsch, Anderson was next. Yeah, Anderson was. It's almost
he was having
funny,
a good time,
isn't he?
Yeah. But
it's almost like he's playing around too much. Like he doesn't really want to win. He just wants to fight. Do you get that feeling?
I do. I think he's happy. He's having fun with it. I think anyone who competes wants to win, but I think he actually is competing to compete and letting the chips fall where they may.
It's kind of odd, right?
Yeah.
And Anderson is one of those guys. Excuse me. Anderson is one of those guys who, even back when he was still champion, you remember before he lost the first time to Weidman, that he was predicting he was going to lose. He was saying weird stuff like that. Like they were like, you know, what's the perfect fight for you? He goes, oh, the perfect fight is the Chris winning. Like people were like, what?
Yeah, getting real philosophical towards the latter part of his career. It was so weird,
and I think part of that was the fact that Anderson had won 16 or 17 UFC fights in a row, and this is something people don't talk about very much. And George St. Pierre experienced this for sure. He told me for himself that when you win so much and you haven't lost for so long, that you develop like another level of pressure where everybody talks about you as if there's no way you can lose and you're never gonna not be champion and you're the man. It builds up even more for people and it becomes more of a problem for them.
Yeah, it's almost a relief in a weird way to lose, to build yourself back up.
And on a lower level, I can tell you from my own experience, when my very first loss, I didn't lose until my 10th fight. I fought Brock Larson, who's a 4-time Division I All-American wrestler. I mean, his only losses were he had a split decision to John Fitch when I fought him. That was it. He was like 29-1.
Right.
And I lost after that fight. I was in a weird way relieved because it was like, all right, people can leave me alone now. Like, stop talking about how like I'm never gonna lose and I'm always gonna win. Because it was like people talk about like, hey, you're gonna beat all these guys. And I was like, man, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna try, but that dude's really fucking good.
Right.
I mean, and he trains every day hard, and he's a badass. Like I could lose. Like it's not.
It's a whole level, an additional level of pressure that you put on yourself, other than the normal pressures of.
So I wonder if that's what kind of got to Anderson a few years ago with the first loss to Chris, and it's changed him since then. Because I mean, it's like he doesn't care to win. He just wants to like go out and do it.
Well, Anderson went through that weird phase. Remember when he fought Damian Maia and was acting different than people had ever seen him act, because he's normally such a humble, loving, kind of joking around kind of guy, and it was weird to see him like that.
He is, but I mean, but it's but with some of those, sometimes the way he attacks the elbows and knees, he's a mean, nasty, scary dude. I mean, it comes to mind like when he fought Bonner, and the second time he fought Chael, he wanted to hurt him.
Yep, nasty.
It was nasty. I remember he just flew in with that knee when Chael was
to the solar plexus.
Yeah, that was mean. Yeah. That was legit. So Anderson Silva defeated Derrick Brunson by a close decision, and man, Derrick Brunson really cried about it a lot. But I mean, I don't agree with Dana White very much, but this is one of those times where I agree with what Dana says. Like, if you don't want to, don't cry about it. If you let it go to the judges, that's your fault. Like, in a close fight, it is what it is. Like, if you let it go to the judges and it's close, well,
chances are a guy like Anderson's going to get the nod.
Yeah, but I don't feel bad for anybody. Like, even if like maybe I thought they did a little better than the other guy, but it was close enough. Like, what's the difference? Like, you didn't you didn't dominate and you didn't finish him, so that's how it worked. That's how it breaks down. Like, I don't feel sorry for him. Let's move on to the main event. What'd you think? Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandame?
Interesting fight. I was surprised at that decision. I thought Holly got the better of her, though I was surprised. I was surprised at the decision when I saw Jermaine's hand raised. However, when I saw the stats, I was a little bit surprised how the difference in significant strikes.
Because Jermaine had a lot more, right?
Correct.
Because Holly was throwing combinations, not really landing very much.
But she seemed to be the most active, trying to mix it up, trying to take her down. Those two strikes after the bell in what was it, rounds 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. One was the elbow, one was the punch that could have gotten.
I mean, the second time at least, like she should have been like, all right,
Yeah.
we're taking a point away.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
What is that? They're both calling for a rematch now. Right?
Well, it's hilarious because number one, Jermaine she's an undefeated 10-time Muay Thai champion. I would have thought she would have. I mean, she wasn't very aggressive.
More Muay Thai?
She wasn't very aggressive with Holly. She basically let Holly come in and she threw power shots, power leg kicks. She did pretty well, but she never really had that kill mode. Never
Agreed.
really went in. Holly's wrestling was atrocious. I mean, for a girl who's been in MMA a long time and a former champion, you would think she'd have a little bit of wrestling in that, even though she has
I think
a
she just
stand-up
stays
background.
in her comfort zone of boxing.
I mean, she pushed for a takedown every round, never got one takedown the whole fight against someone from Holland.
Right.
Let's be real here.
Yeah,
there is zero wrestling going on in Holland. If you can't take down a Dutch person, you got some fucking problems. Like
She might have been worried about some knees coming up.
If you can't take down a Dutch person, you ain't taking down anybody ever. I mean, her wrestling coach, is that Izzy guy? I mean, I'd be really sad if I was him.
Yeah, it is Izzy. Huh? Well, he's legit.
He's legit.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he should have been ashamed of himself and ashamed of Holly for not pushing for takedowns. She spent a lot of time going for takedowns and never got one. Never once ran the pipe, changed angles, dropped all the way down. And a couple times she got her hands all the way right behind Jermaine's back, locked her hands and couldn't
finish it.
Not even close. Like what? I was, and I'm not a good wrestler. And it was hard for me to watch. So,
right.
If that tells you anything. Real funny after the fight, Jermaine talked about, I can't wait to fight again.
Hand surgery.
And then as soon as Joe Rogan goes, we got Chris Cyborg over here.
I'll be out for 6 months.
It's probably going to be her and you next.
Right.
Oh, well, fuck, my hand's super hurt. I'm going to have some surgery. I have big problems. Then 2 days later, I think I should have a rematch right away with Holly Holm. Like, I thought you just said you have surgery.
Right.
It's so funny because I train with Chris all the time. See her at the gym, spar with her, everything. I think Chris is a great lady, and I know you've worked with her before.
Love Chris.
She has I think she'll eat either of those girls alive.
Absolutely.
In a heartbeat.
No one can touch Chris.
Well, especially those two.
Right.
Those two girls. She would, and it's weird because Chris had that Muay Thai loss that is it Joanna Bears or something like the Muay Thai girl that she lost to.
Right.
I mean, I thought Jermaine's Muay Thai would be
better
on level
than
with
hers.
that girl, but
Yeah.
it's not. And Chris will eat both those girls alive. And that's what I have to say about UFC 208.
Me too.
All right. American Animals. Remember, you guys, at the number 2 American Animals on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Follow us, subscribe. We'll be back in just a minute more with Richard Wilner. Welcome back to American Animals. I'm Erik Apple. That's Richard Wilner. We're some pretty good looking white dudes up in here.
Feeling it.
We got some vanilla gorillas going on. All right. You guys remember 2 American Animals. Follow us, subscribe to us. Make sure you find us and check us out on our website. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes, Google, Stitcher Player, all that good stuff. Also, shout out to bjpenn.com and the Underground, MMA.tv for carrying all of our content. We love you guys. Thank you so much. Let's talk about some news.
Let's do it.
Big news going on. One of the things we saw today, George St. Pierre is back. He's all but back. They said the contract, they said everything's agreed to on the terms.
It's looking like it.
Wow. That's a big deal. And you remember just a few months ago, WME, remember they were talking about signing George, and then they said, well, we don't know if we want to spend the money to reintroduce the fighting fans to George because we think that they forgot who he is, which
It's crazy. No one's forgotten about
hilarious,
George.
right? Oh, really?
Right.
People don't know who George is?
Right.
Are you guys sure? And then one of the big sticking points with that, if you remember, was the Reebok deal because George has I imagine, a 6 or 7 figure deal with Under Armour.
Under Armour, right.
I don't know if it's 7 figures anymore, but I'm sure it's a sizable deal. So that was the biggest sticking point with him re-signing was, hey, you guys got to pay me more than you were before because I'm losing a huge sponsor that's paying me 6 figures or maybe more.
So they were able to work it out. Yeah, I'm sure it's huge, especially from the management that negotiated it.
I mean, they have to work it out because let's look at the situation with the UFC right now. They're fucked. Ronda's gone.
Right.
Nate Diaz said, unless you got $20 million, don't call me. Nick turned down a fight with Robbie Lawler, turned down a fight with Tyron Woodley, and then we got Conor doing who knows what. We'll talk about that in a minute. Who do they got?
What big marquee names?
How are they going to break 1 million pay-per-view buys? Which they need to do that a couple times a year, right? How are they going to do that right now?
Good point.
Without Conor, without Ronda, without one of the Diaz brothers, who's going to do that shit? Tyron Woodley? Nope.
No.
Michael Bisping? Doubt it.
Maybe,
but
Maybe that's
know.
the fight.
Stipe Miocic? Nope. Who's going to do it?
George and Bisping.
Yeah, that could do it. So let's talk about some of the possible matchups. George and Bisping will be huge. But here's the thing. What weight is George going to fight at? Because I've heard him say that he could fight Bisping. I've also heard him recently say that he can make 55 without too much of a cut or too much of a pain. So
maybe Conor.
That's the biggest fight. Yeah. That's the biggest fight that we could possibly put together money-wise as far as MMA. Conor and George would do $1.5 million. I think that could be the biggest pay-per-view ever for UFC. That'd do $2 million.
I think it would be.
Could you imagine?
It'd be a fun fight.
It'd be a fun fight.
But wouldn't that conflict with Conor's boxing obligations? What's going on with him and Mayweather?
So let's talk about that next. So supposedly, it's been reported in Ireland, which I don't ever trust the Irish. I don't know about you, but supposedly it's a done deal. The terms have been agreed upon by both McGregor's side and Floyd's side. They're pending approval of an unnamed third party, which I don't know who that could be.
Yeah, I wonder.
So how does the UFC go about that? Now, and how does Conor and Floyd go about that? Do they want to try to pull off this fight under the Ali Act and say, well, this is boxing. The Ali Act says I can do this if I want. And possibly get held up with, they could get a
restraining order,
an injunction. Is it the same thing?
Same thing. Yeah.
If they try to do it without the UFC's approval, the UFC could slap an injunction on them and stop them, right?
The UFC would have to go to court and ask a judge to, enjoin or slap an injunction on them, preventing them from fighting, preventing the promoter from organizing it.
Yeah. Which, of course, they're going to do. So
they'd have to. If they're not involved in the promotion of it, they'd have to stop it.
So at this point, it's all speculation because who knows? Who knows exactly what's going on because we're not in that situation. So we're just talking, we're giving our educated opinions here. I would have to imagine that if Floyd and Conor were going to do it themselves, that they would just have to straight agree to pay the UFC a flat fee or a percentage. Like, hey, we'll give you $10 million to just let us do this or whatever.
It's got to be huge.
It's got to be more than $10 million too.
I read this morning that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is tied, obviously, 49-0 with one man in boxing history, Rocky Marciano. So that to break that record, the curse, he would need to have a fight that's an easy fight. Is that an easy fight?
You never know. Theoretically, it is. Theoretically, Conor should not be able to really touch him or hurt him ever. Theoretically, Floyd should be able to play with him, touch him up, and never get damaged at all for as long as he wants. Theoretically, Floyd should be able to finish Conor and put him down with just an accumulation of punches, kind of like a Nick Diaz style. Theoretically. Now, I don't know. Many times I've counted Conor out before.
Finds a way to win.
I thought no way he'd beat Jose Aldo. I thought no way. When Chad Mendes took him down, I was like, oh, it's over.
Right.
You get to elbow him into living death. It's going to be done. Who knows? At this point, I can't bet against the guy. I could see Conor dancing on outside and just kind of jumping in with big punch and blasting him.
But 3 or 5-minute rounds is way different than 3, 10, or 12-minute rounds.
Correct.
And Conor's got heavy hands, but, difference in gloves and a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. And then now, remember, Conor was granted a license to box in the state of California, which doesn't make any sense to me because Floyd hasn't fought in California for a decade or more.
Vegas.
And Floyd won't fight anywhere outside of Nevada because he runs Nevada. He runs the athletic commission. I don't know if you've ever seen the clip. Have you seen the clip of Floyd drinking purple Gatorade in the corner during his fight?
No.
That's a real thing. I'll show you the clip. There's a real clip of Floyd's dad or his uncle, I can't remember if it's Roger or his dad, giving him Gatorade in the corner with the dude that athletic commission standing right there looking at it. I was like, what the fuck? You're supposed to just have water, like nothing else.
Unreal.
I remember putting an emergency in a water before one of my fights. Like, you can't drink that. I was like, what? You can't put anything else in your water. I was like, it's an emergency. There's a packet right here. Nope.
But they let Floyd drink purple Gatorade.
Straight up
because it was purple?
I knew it. So it's pretty entertaining. Now, the new Nevada State Athletic Commission Executive Director Bob Bennett has informed the LA Times that in order to keep a potential McGregor-Mayweather scrap in Vegas, the Nevada Athletic Commission has already said they would, of course, grant Conor a license to box in Nevada. So
that's the fight. That's the money fight.
Now, how many buys will that do? 2 million, 3 million, 4 million?
Millions.
Now, Floyd and Manny did over 2 million. I think 2.2, 2.4 million buys at $100. Do the math.
Big money.
Do the math on that, sir. That's why Floyd's able to write himself $100 million checks what he feels like. So it's getting interesting, but at this point, it's all still speculation. I mean, who knows if it's Conor just hyping himself up and talking a bunch of shit. So
let's see.
We'll see how that how that develops. The Cyborg situation. Dana White and a couple other people have been talking about how her USADA case is looking very good, and it looks like she may be granted a retroactive TUE.
But it's still not decided yet, right?
Well,
as of today, there was nothing.
USADA has not made an announcement, but supposedly it's going very well.
Right.
I mean, if Dana says it's going pretty well, I kind of believe him. He's not the first, he's not the kind of person to kind of, lie and try to soften it up.
Right.
If it's going bad, he would say she's fucked.
Yep.
Because he hasn't been easy on her before.
Ever.
Now Chris is a smart girl. She's a really great person. I know you know her pretty well. My feeling on it is that, listen, she's been in trouble once before with getting busted a couple years ago. I can't imagine that, because she's one of the most tested athletes in the UFC. I can't imagine that she just, after being tested every week or every other week, that she just was like, oh yeah, I want to start taking some shit that I'm not supposed to take. I mean, come on. Obviously, doctors were giving it to her, and they told her that this is what she had to take for her medical reasons. We all know that her last cut under George Lockhart was a mess.
Brutal.
It was brutal. I mean, we've seen the videos of her crying, bawling, freaking out. Obviously, she's not having a great time. I know she said she had some problems with her blood sludging afterwards.
Yeah, she told me that after her fight, and she was in the hospital in Brazil for, I want to say, almost 2 weeks. And they were trying to draw blood from her, and they couldn't because it was like, she described it as mud. I don't know what the medical terminology is.
Sludging.
Sludging.
Medical terminology, sludging. Yeah. Sludging is a side effect of when, like Tour de France, all the bikers guys, they do EPO. If you do EPO and you let yourself get too dehydrated, your blood will sludgen, which means it gets too thick, the viscosity changes, and you can cause a stroke or a heart attack immediately. It's really dangerous when your blood sludges. It's not a joke.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very, very important thing for her. I believe that she wouldn't just start taking something to take it because she wants to get buffered or more ripped or something.
No.
I believe doctors gave it to her. I give her the benefit of the doubt. It's just sad because MMA fans are rough and people really, really bash on her on social media and stuff like that. And it's sad because Chris is one of the nicest girls you could ever meet.
Great girl. And works super hard.
She's such a nice person. I want to have her on the show maybe next week or the week after. We'll get her up here. Let's move on. Michael Bisping and Romero are supposed to be fighting soon. Have you seen the shit they're talking to each other?
It's great.
Romero started a GoFundMe for Michael Bisping's medical expenses, and he's got like a couple grand on there now, which is the best part.
It's crazy.
Pretty funny. That's a tough fight for Michael. In a 5-round fight, I give Mike a better chance than a 3-round fight because Romero's so big and just got muscles on top of muscles.
So big, so strong. Obviously, an amazing wrestler.
Did you see
world class?
You see the way he punked Weidman?
Yeah, after Weidman took him down or almost took him, he said, That's not happening.
Well, it's funny.
He started punking.
It's funny because, like, you know, I mean, I don't have a great understanding of wrestling, but I know a little bit, and you have a better understanding of wrestling than I do, especially with your kids and stuff. World class level, you know, international wrestlers.
Oh, absolutely.
Against a guy who wrestled in America in college at Hofstra. I mean, a couple of times Yoel just punked Weidman.
And Hofstra's no joke, and Chris's wrestling is legit.
Yeah.
But the internationals are a whole different level.
Yeah, I mean, and Yoel punked him a couple of times and took him down and made him look stupid. Like, it wasn't just a takedown. It was like a fuck you takedown. You can look stupid.
I don't think he's going to do that to Bisping, though. I think Bisping will be able to strike around takedowns, and because Bisping works with my man Perillo, I think Bisping will be prepared for that fight as he is in every fight. And listen to Jason. Jason says, you know, no one works like Bisping works.
He's a hard worker. Okay, there's not a couple thousand. I'm looking at it right now. There's only $225 so far raised for Michael Bisping's GoFundMe. And the picture is a picture of him with his big black bloody eye that he got from Dan Henderson. I mean, that's some good trolling right there.
Pretty funny.
You got to respect that trolling game right there. It's pretty good, especially for a dude who doesn't speak the greatest English and isn't really as indoctrinated in American culture as Yoel Romero is. It's pretty good.
Right.
It's pretty good. Moving on. Holly Holm today officially appealed her loss to Jermaine. I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
No,
but to be honest, very, very rarely. I've heard of one or two getting turned over or turned into a draw, but very rarely. I mean, it's like an umpire in baseball. Once I make that call, even if I know I'm wrong, I ain't going back.
I think the fight was close enough, in my opinion, where it could have gone either way, but I don't think it's something so egregious where an athletic commission or the state attorney general's office, whoever does the appeals, is going to overturn it.
Yep. Moving on. David Branch, you know who that is? He's the World Series of Fighting middleweight and light heavyweight champion.
Right.
He's been with World Series of Fighting since the beginning of their organization. He is leaving World Series of Fighting, and he's signed a contract to come back to the UFC.
Good for David.
And I just don't think anyone's going to care. Have you seen him fight?
No.
I mean, he's about as exciting as John Fitch.
I like John Fitch.
I like John. I didn't say I don't like John
Right.
Fitch. I just say he's not that exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, when John Fitch wants to go to bed at night, he puts on a David Branch fight. So
No comment.
I'm just saying, David Branch. I mean, it's funny because he's really good. His submissions are great. He's pretty well rounded, but I don't know. He just doesn't do it for nobody. Really gets
Dave
excited
Branch
for him.
is a jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, he's from Henzo's, I believe.
That's right.
He's a great fighter, nice guy. He's just not that exciting. And I'm actually sort of surprised the UFC brought him in. I can't imagine they're paying him more than World Series of Fighting. World Series of Fighting is probably going to lose their other champion, their 135-pound champion as well.
To the UFC.
I would think so. It's gonna be tough for them to keep some of those guys. I don't really know what's going on with them. I know they pushed one of their events back. I'm trying to think. They pushed one of their events back recently. Moving on, Ultimate Fighter 25, season 25 has been announced. Have you heard anything about it?
Not a lot.
It's going to be called Redemption, and they're bringing back past winners of the Ultimate Fighter or top guys from the Ultimate Fighter. It's actually pretty exciting. They got guys like Diego Lima and Joe Stevenson and Jesse Taylor coming back. I think it's kind of cool to change it up now and then because it's kind of gotten kind of stale, right? Bringing in two weight classes, a bunch of dudes you never heard of. Some are clowns, some are good, but none of them are.
Joe Stevenson's looking great, fit.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
I haven't seen him for a long time.
I've seen some pictures of his training and some of his strength and conditioning coaches, and he's looking amazing.
I was going to mention, actually, let's go back to Joe Stevenson. Joe Stevenson was fighting King of the Cage. He was like 15, 16. I think he was a champion at 17 or 18. He was a kid, if you remember. I think he beat Romy Aram way back in the day. The guy I was talking about from the World Series of Fighting is Marlon Moraes. He's a real good 135er. He vacated his title just last month to become a free agent, and he had something like 5 or 6 title defenses. And
He's been around for a long time, too.
Yeah, he's a real tough young guy. He trains with Eddie Alvarez and all those guys over there, and Frankie Edgar. So he's a real tough guy. He's going to be leading World Series of Fighting as well. That's going to do it for our news. We're going to come back in just a minute. We're going to preview UFC Fight Night and the Bellator event coming up with Fedor and Mitrione, and then we're going to get into the big bad story of immigration with Richard Wilner here on American Animals. We'll be right back. Welcome back to American Animals. I'm Erik Apple. That's Richard Wilner. This is episode number 30. And I told you guys before, support us on bjpenn.com and MMA.tv, the underground. Make sure you find us on all forms of social media at the number 2 American Animals. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Also, we have a Patreon now. I just started a Patreon. I don't even know how to run it, but I just started it. We're going to get it going. Find us on there too.
What's Patreon?
Patreon is a place where people can go to support shows, podcasts, artists that they like by donating like $2 a month or $5 a month.
Cool.
It's like everyone just says, yeah, I like your show. I'll give you $2 a month or whatever, something like that. But a lot of people are on it. I was told I need to get signed up, so I got to sign up. I haven't really paid that much attention to it, but I'll get around to it. Let's preview the fights that are coming up this weekend. We have the Bellator card. Bellator put on some exciting fights now and then, and this is a relatively good one.
Card.
We'll go straight to the main card because the prelims are not really very many people. I know James Terry's on there. He's pretty much the only guy that I've ever heard of on their prelims. So we'll go straight to the main card. Josh Koscheck. I mean, man, I couldn't imagine ever seeing him fight out of the UFC. He had some like 20-something UFC fights. He's fighting Mauricio Alonso. It's a welterweight fight. Mauricio Alonso fought before at 185, so he's cutting down. Koscheck, always a tough guy. He's been around a long time. Obviously has a wrestling background. He didn't look very good his last couple of fights in the UFC, but against Mauricio Alonso, we could see him do all right. Anything to say about Josh?
I like Josh. I've always been a fan of Josh's. I do like that American wrestler style.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see him come back. I think he's going to do well.
Nose to the grindstone. Moving on the main card, Brooke Mayo and Veta Arteaga, a couple girls fighting at 125. And then Czech Congo taking on Ollie Thompson. Ollie Thompson is a big boy, 6'1", 255 out of England, fighting Czech. Czech is always a big, bad, pretty intimidating looking dude.
Yep. I know he's been training hard.
And you said he's training at HP Ultimate?
Training at HP Ultimate. Head coach Paul Herrera. Paul's been around a long time, knows the game. Paul fought in UFC 1.
Was it the very first one?
Pretty sure it was UFC 1, so Paul knows the game.
Man,
Paul was an All-American at University of Nebraska back in the day as a wrestler, so Czech's in good hands. I think I'm going to go with Czech on that one.
Yeah, I would have to think so as well. Actually, I've seen Ollie Thompson fight. He's pretty tough. Let's move on. Now, this is a pretty exciting fight. Lightweight, this is the co-main event. Patricky Pitbull, him and his brother have been done real well there in Bellator. He's fighting Josh Thompson at 155, and those are a couple tough dudes right there. I see, Josh is getting up there in age a little bit, and Pitbull hits pretty hard. I don't know. It's a scary fight, but you can't count Josh Thompson out. Ever.
Those guys both are nonstop. Someone will.
Yeah, Josh is a guy who's in shape and brings it, and he's always in the fight. So I don't see it being an easy fight, but I think Pitbull gets that win. In the main event, Fedor's back, taking on Matt Mitrione. This is Mitrione's second fight in the UFC. Did you see? I'm sorry, in Bellator. Did you see his first Bellator fight?
I did.
He almost got knocked out.
Yeah,
he came back and smashed the dude. That was a tough fight. And Fedor, I mean, God, I'm so excited to see Fedor, but it's like I'm excited and I'm worried. I don't know what to think because he looks so bad.
It's a weird feeling getting nervous watching Fedor.
Oh, because you want to see him do good. You remember all the things he was doing a decade ago in Pride. I mean, do you remember the beatings he put on Heath Herring and Nogueira and Krokop? And those were the guys that we thought were the toughest dudes in the world, and he was just
making them look silly,
brutalizing them. I mean, I remember hearing the sounds of Nog's head bouncing off the ring, and just thinking, "Oh my!"
Fedor's been out for a little while now. It'll be interesting to see him come back, but I'm going to go with Meathead on this one.
And he fought, and Fedor fought the Brazilian in Russia a couple months ago.
Right. Bigfoot.
No,
not Bigfoot.
The smaller one, the boxer. I'll have to look up his name right now. But,
I'm drawing a blank.
It's okay.
But Bigfoot did fight in Russia. That's why I thought
he did.
Yeah.
And did you know that they turned that fight over on Fedor, the athletic commission? They turned it into a draw.
No, I did not.
Remember, he got the win, and everyone was like,
right.
He didn't win that fight. He lost 2 of those rounds 10-8, right? Which is kind of funny. But, and, if a commission turns over a Fedor fight, Fabio Maldonado.
That's right. Great boxer.
If they turn over a Fedor fight in Russia, you know that he lost.
It was bad.
Yeah. Now, Fedor has 5 wins in a row. He beat Jeff Monson, Ishii, Pedro Hizo, Sin Jadip, and Fabio Maldonado. Before that, though, remember, he had 3 losses in a row in Strikeforce. Verdum, Antonio Silva, and Deanne Henderson. Of course, you were there for the Verdum one with us, weren't you?
Right.
I remember I sponsored Verdum with Rockstar for that fight.
That's right.
I look like a brain surgeon.
In fact, the morning of that fight, we had to put the Rockstar logos on his apparel. I think I personally ironed it on.
Did you?
His apparel.
We look smart, don't we?
That was a great fight. I managed Fabricio at that time, and it was pretty emotional.
Yeah,
evening.
of course. Yeah. I remember everyone dancing and singing for hours. It was hilarious.
It's pretty awesome.
It was pretty awesome.
And Fabricio started it all. In beating Fedor, he changed the landscape of the game.
Yeah, nobody beat him for 30-something fights. Well, actually, he really was undefeated. He technically had a loss to TK. Remember, TK elbowed him and cut his. And
that's right.
And cut him, and they gave him a loss.
That's right.
But elbows were illegal. It should have been a no contest or a draw. So I mean, realistically, he had never lost until Fabricio beat him. That was his 32nd fight, 33rd fight. So Fabricio did start it all. Matt Mitrione, Fedor, man, it's tough. I mean, I like Meehead a lot, but I want to see Fedor do good. I'm just afraid he's going to get beat up and embarrassed, and I hope not, because I'll tell you what, I know for a fact that the plan is for for Bellator to bring in Crow Cop and get him to fight Fedor one more time. They're trying to put that together. I know that for sure. That's the plan.
That would be fun.
That'd be fun. Man, I don't know. I feel like Crow Cop's aged a little better.
Yeah, he has. He just won
he just
the
beat
Risen Grand Prix.
Yeah, we talked about him on the show a couple weeks ago. He looked great. But that's Crow Cop, who's allowed to take whatever he wants.
Right.
TRT Crow Cop looked great. Right. Okay, let's preview our UFC fight night that we have coming up. We have a main event, Derrick Lewis and Chavez Brown. We'll start towards the bottom of the card. Not a lot of big names on the prelims. I do see Faraj Zahabi's little brother is going to make his UFC premiere. So that'll be kind of exciting. Carla Esparza is fighting as well as the prelims. Moving on to the main card, some of the bigger fights, Johny Hendricks and Hector Lombard. It's quite a welcome to 185 for Johny Hendricks. I almost remember he didn't make weight again last time.
Right.
After remember all the shit he talked about making weight? Because he missed a couple times, and he said, I got it this time. It's not going to be a problem, not going to be a problem.
And it was a problem.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You guys are idiots for thinking I'm going to do this again, and he did it again. I almost feel like this is kind of a punishment for UFC. Like, he has one more fight in his deal. He's like, all right, well, we got one more fight.
Give him Hector.
You've been a pain in the ass. You've missed weight. You made everyone look bad. So we're going to let you fight.
Yeah, tough fight. Super tough fight. 2 tough guys. I think Johnny's wrestling might be neutralized a bit with Hector's judo and takedown defense.
I mean, a judo Olympian is not a joke. But Hector's been hit or miss. So
he hasn't really performed up to expectations, has he?
There's been some days where he's been doing so well, and there's other times he doesn't. He's kind of off or on. Main event: Derrick Lewis and Chavez Brown. Derrick Lewis ranked number 8 currently in the UFC. Chavez Brown number 9. Have you seen Derrick Lewis? His social media?
No.
He's hilarious. He has one of the funnier social medias. You should follow him. He does all kinds of funny memes, and he makes them himself. They're pretty good.
Neat.
He's pretty funny. What do you think about this fight?
Both very talented, very big men. I'm gonna go with Travis on this one. Travis is gonna do it for Hawaii.
Travis is another guy who's kind of off and on. Some days he just looks unstoppable, and other times he don't look like he got much. Verdum made him look bad.
Real bad.
Kane made him look bad. But I mean, he's a big, strong guy. When he puts it together, seems like he can beat anybody on the right day.
Did he change up his camp at all for this fight, or is he still with your man Edmund?
He's in Vegas training, and Edmund is still his boxing coach. But he's been training out in Vegas with a lot of it because there's so many more bodies, especially heavyweight bodies.
Right.
But he's still Team Glendale, son. Glendale. What do they say? Brow down.
Brow down. The 818.
What is going on with that, Edmund? Have you had any interaction with Edmund?
Never.
I just do not get it.
Yeah, me neither.
Have you ever seen that clip of him saying that if he fought in the UFC, he would beat Jose Aldo at 145? Right. He's fucking amazing. He might be the greatest.
Confident.
He's also the guy who claimed bankruptcy when he was he was coaching Ronda and she was making millions of dollars to fight.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You gotta love the Armenians. I mean, you know that it's a statistically a fact that if you're an Armenian man in Southern California, you have a 98% chance of a history of electronic fraud. It's like
I didn't know that. I've never read that stat.
It's a fact. It's 100% fact. You can look that up.
I'm gonna Google that.
So we got some pretty exciting fights coming this weekend. So make sure everyone checks those out. We're gonna get to another break, and it's time to talk about immigration, also what's going on in our country and our borders. Here on American Animals with Erik Apple and Richard Wilner. Welcome back to American Animals. Richard Wilner hanging out with your host, Erik Apple. Ian McCall is out once again this week. He'll be back next week, and we will break down all the stuff that's gone on with him as of late and find out what his current medical condition is. We all hope for a speedy recovery, and we'll have him back on soon to explain to you guys what's going on with him. We know a lot of you guys are let down. He wasn't able to fight this week, but we'll get him out there soon, I promise. Richard, I want to know, before we really get into the current news and the current situation, current events with immigration, I want to know more about your business and how you help people and your history.
Sure. So start with the history a little bit. I always knew that I wanted to do something international.
Yep.
Knew that I was going to be a lawyer, all that good stuff, and I always thought I wanted to do something international. So I went to school in California, but then I spent some time working and studying overseas in both Europe and Asia. And while studying and working in Thailand and Vietnam, thought I was going to be doing maritime law because that's what I was doing there. And over there, we were literally tracking down pirates, not like dudes with eye patches and swords.
No, but people pulling up the boats with machine guns saying, give me all your shit.
Yeah, but not just little not like Somali dudes and little skiffs and AKs. These were major international scams where ocean-going carriers would get stolen and then pulled behind a feeder island or pull behind an island like in the Gulf of Thailand, and the whole ship would be painted and bills of lading changed and reflagged and cargo changed or cargo offloaded, and the whole ship would disappear.
That's awesome.
And it was awesome, and it was great, and it was real fun, and we'd board ships and all that good stuff. Long story short, when I came...
Well, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Whose authority or whose force would be tracking down these boats or boarding these ships? Each individual country, or is there an international body that oversees that?
Well, I think it would be based upon where the ship was, where the crime took place or where the theft took place. And for us, anything that happened in Thai waters or Vietnamese waters would be subject to the jurisdiction of Thailand or Vietnam. So the firms that I worked at...
What if that boat is taken somewhere else?
Then it would be subject to their...
So if I steal a boat in Thailand and take it to Malaysia, then it's the Malay government who deals
Traditionally,
with it?
yep.
Okay.
Yep, but all sorts
See,
of...
I like this because I've known you for a decade, and I didn't know this stuff about you. So it's funny. All the time when I have guests on here who I've known a long time, I get to know more about them. I actually really enjoy it.
So, and in the situation you described, there might be different governments involved because as well as to where it took place and where it ended up, because the country whose flag the vessel flies may have an interest in either the ship itself or the cargo on board, or you may have multiple countries involved. In our case, the firm that I worked at, we represented what's called protection and indemnity clubs, basically an insurance company. So the insurance companies were our clients, and we would have to investigate the claims of theft on their behalf.
There's a claim made. You guys have to make sure it's legit. Where'd the boat go?
Correct. To make sure that it actually was a legitimate theft and not some fraud, some scam that was set up so they could collect the insurance money.
And is that something that went on quite a bit?
A lot. And
10% of the time, 50% of the time?
I don't know the stats, but it's
a guess.
I would say probably 20 to 40%.
Wow.
Is probably there's an inside man.
Wow.
We also worked with marine investigation firms, the overwhelming majority of which are from Southampton in England. So they would fly over marine investigators to Thailand, and I would accompany these guys boarding ships, and things like that. And it was fascinating.
And this is once the ships have been recovered?
Correct. Or if there was something that happened on the ship, injury, something goes missing, you name it. And if a ship was recovered and brought into port, we would board the ships to investigate, and it was great. Well, fast forward, coming back to the United States, I thought I wanted to do maritime law because of my experience there. Well, there's no pirates here. Okay. If you do,
we have a Coast Guard and a
Right.
Navy. There's not much,
Right.
but
So-
that shit ain't going on between here and Catalina. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah.
Damn.
Well, believe it or not, yeah, no pirates, at least that I found out about here. So if you're doing maritime law in the United States and specifically in the Long Beach area, the Port of Los Angeles, you're dealing with seaside
Shit going on in the docks.
shit going on in the docks. So you're either dealing with longshoremen or doing general labor and employment law, but as it relates to the water, and is right.
It doesn't sound very fun with those.
Yeah, you're dealing with longshoremen, you're dealing with Teamsters unions because from the ships, the containers get taken off and loaded onto trucks, taken to trains, or so when you're on land, when you're dealing with trucks, you're dealing with Teamsters. You're dealing with stuff that happens at the docks, you're dealing with longshoremen, and you're either representing people against the longshoremen or the longshoremen against them. And either way, to me, it
doesn't sound
a
very
nightmare.
fun,
Yeah. Or you're doing freight collection work. So someone ships goods and doesn't pay for them, but you're not talking like a FedEx bill or, a FedEx box. You're talking shipping a container and then stuff goes missing and stuff goes wrong. And it was pretty dry
Yep.
work. So fast forward, knowing that I wanted to do something international and I was a rugby player at the time and played rugby for 15 years. An Australian teammate of mine said, "You should be an immigration lawyer." And it planted the seed in my head of immigration law. Back in the day, what we used to do, and it was totally legal, we would go down to Tijuana for the day. So you could be here as a visitor in the United States. And a lot of guys, Australia, New Zealand, that would come over, hang out for the summer, play rugby. If you're from New Zealand, Australia, other places, Southern Hemisphere countries, or anywhere, most civilized countries in the United States, you can enter the United States just on your passport. You don't need a visa to come here.
Yeah.
So if you're a French guy, you can come here and stay for 90 days. You can't extend or change your status, but you're allowed to be here for 90 days. You leave the United States. When you come back, you get another 90 days. So we used to roll down to Mexico, or guys would go down there, and then they leave the United States and they come back, a couple days later, whenever, and get another 90 days to hang out. And that's what they would do. So a guy that I know that had done that, planted the seed, you should consider doing immigration law. And that's how the idea was born in my head.
Now, you didn't specifically study immigration law in law school.
Correct.
So then you had to freshen up on that kind of stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, in law school, you don't specialize in any given area. Law school is designed to teach you essentially, general subject matter knowledge of most areas of law, but law school reputation is gauged in large part on how many of their students pass the bar exam. So they teach you the law you need to know to pass the bar. And then when you graduate from law school,
you go work at a firm and you learn that particular trade.
Correct. So when you're in law school, you're doing summer internships at firms that you ultimately may work for, and that's how you learn to specialize in a given area.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
My summers were spent overseas because I wanted to go overseas. So when I graduated law school, I wasn't like these other guys who had a job at some corporate firm. That world's not for me anyway. So when I came back, after doing the maritime law thing, thinking that's what I was going to do, and I'd landed a job doing maritime law, but it was doing what I said about freight collection. So
did you have to go work for a firm and start to learn about someone?
I did.
You went to work for someone else's immigration firm.
I did. 2 different firms. There was a lady that I had worked with when I was in law school at a place called the Public Law Center, which is Orange County's biggest, and if not one of the biggest in the nation, a public interest law firm. I wasn't doing immigration law there.
What's a public interest law firm?
Public interest law firm is basically for low-income people who can qualify and show that they need legal assistance or a lot of community outreach stuff. So I had worked at this firm, it's privately funded. They don't get any government grants. It's funded essentially from lawyer donations to help people.
Okay.
So I had worked at this firm, met someone there. She and her husband ended up starting an immigration firm. I worked there for about a year until I landed a job at a big immigration firm, or big by immigration standards, which at that time the firm had 14 lawyers, which is what we have today. Where I've met my partner. He and I were partners at that firm, and now we're partners today.
Can you tell us, I mean, are you, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about your clients in the past. Can you tell us about some of your bigger clients, athletes, celebrities, and stuff like that you've worked with? And
Sure. Some I can, some I can't. But guys, guys that we know.
Before we go to that, how come you can mention some and some you can't?
Well, guys that I know, I suppose
they just wouldn't want you to tell everyone.
No, not that. It's just that without their permission, sometimes some would argue that even the names of the people that you represent are protected by the attorney-client privilege. Sure. But a lot of the stuff that I would say now is public information anyway. If someone were to Google it, so. My first real major celebrity client was a boxer by the name of Manny Pacquiao.
Yep. And was that is he a citizen here, or he has a green card or a visa?
He's not a citizen. And then his immigration, I don't represent Manny anymore, so I couldn't comment on that anyway, or in terms of what his status is. But I know Manny's not a citizen here because Manny is a politician in the Philippines, and you can't be a U.S. citizen and do politics in another country.
Really?
Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So I was a fan of Manny's, and when we started our business, my partner and I sat down and said, essentially name a client that you're going to go out and get. And I'm like, Manny Pacquiao.
That's awesome.
And I did it, and it worked.
That's awesome.
I used to go to all Manny's fights. It was really cool and really fun, and met a bunch of people in the Filipino entertainment industry. So we represented everyone there is to represent in Filipino entertainment. I'd mention their names, but well, you may know them, but
I don't know the Filipinos.
but no one else would, so I'll spare that.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've been blessed or lucky or whatever you want to call it to have represented a number of people in sports that I like, love, do, you name it. So for the most part, the majority of Brazilian guys that have fought in the UFC or Bellator for that matter at one point or another have been clients of ours.
Now, is it much easier to help somebody get a green card or a visa? Well, actually, real quick, why don't we explain the difference between a green card and a visa?
So the big
short
difference,
version.
The short version is this: visas are traditionally non-immigrant. Non-immigrant means that you're going home after you come here to do what it is that you're here to do, whether it's visit for business or pleasure, whether it's to do work, whether it's to invest, to things like that. So non-immigrant means that you're going home. Green card,
you're coming here to stay.
You're coming here to stay. The legal term for a green card is lawful permanent resident. So that means you're coming here to stay. You're immigrating to the United States, and the law requires you to be here for at least 6 months out of the year. Some people, especially older people, will get green cards so they think that they can apply for different benefits, Medicare, Social Security, that kind of stuff. And what they do is they think that they can use their green cards as a visitor's visa. So they only come here, or in other situations as well. A guy may be from a country where it's easier to buy a green card, invest $1 million or more in the United States, buy a green card, but he still lives overseas. I don't deal with cases like that. I deal with people who want to come here and make a positive impact, productive foreign-born individuals or companies who want to come here and stay and do good.
Okay.
So
now, is it also easier to get visas and green cards for athletes than it is for an average person, especially if they're competing on a national level or a big show like UFC, Bellator, or even like a high-level grappler?
Absolutely. So in order to do a visa for an athlete, you have to show, number one, that they're internationally recognized. Number two, you have to show that they're coming here to compete in events which require the services of an internationally recognized athlete. So we've done cases for years in the jiu-jitsu world and other martial arts, but you can't have, let's say, a top-level guy, let's say Jacare, because we were talking about him before. A guy like Jacare is very, very qualified to get an athlete's visa, but you'd have to show that he's coming here to compete in a major event, not compete in an event taking place in a high school gym.
Sure.
And then green cards are the same thing, but a heightened standard, and these guys can sponsor themselves. They don't need a job offer. Guys, old school dudes like Babalu who have a storied history, a good history in terms of competition, they can sponsor themselves because if you're extraordinary at what you do, it's presumed to be in the best interest of the United States to have you here.
Okay, understood. And I know that you've helped. I know Babalu recently became a full citizen.
Full citizen.
Cyborg as well. Yeah. And can you give us a short version of the time of obviously it varies, but approximate time between when you start the process till you actually can become a citizen and the money that's involved, because it's definitely not a cheap thing to go through to go through the processes correctly. And that will lead us after the break into our next story.
Sure. So to do it right, and let's just use the example of a fighter because that's what we're talking about. That is, we'll keep it fight focused. Let's talk about Chris. So Chris has done it right from day one. And that's one thing I love about Chris and people like Chris is that they make it a point to do it right. They're afraid, for lack of a better word, to do it wrong. Not that they're going to get deported, but they just don't want they want to be law abiding. They want to do it the right way.
They don't want to give anybody else any ammo.
Right. So for Chris or someone like Chris, the standard path would be to come here as a non-immigrant on an athlete's visa to come and compete. Got to understand that the landscape of MMA has changed, especially for Brazilians, because back in the day, they may come here to compete and then go home because the training was way better for them in Brazil.
Yep.
That landscape changed and the training became overall way better here.
So is that a considered involvement that you would that in the application process you would say, hey, the best training in the world is here, so this athlete needs to be here?
Not necessarily.
But it can be?
But it can be, yeah. We may elect to build that into a case. But for someone like Chris would come as a non-immigrant on an athlete's visa to come compete. I want to say we did her first visa back in the day for Elite XC to fight the girl that she fought before, Gina. Me and Rich Cho worked on that together.
Yep.
So someone like Chris would come here on a visitor's visa, and then ultimately, if they decide to stay, because you can't come here as a visitor with the intent to remain. If you come here and then decide to stay, that's okay. So that's Chris ultimately decided that she'd go back and forth for years. And then she ultimately decided that it was in her best interest to be here and then applied for her permanent residency, her green card, based on her extraordinary ability as an athlete.
Sure.
That can take up to a year. In some cases, it happens pretty quickly just because the officer involved or...
Yeah, and then real quick, who approves it? Now, there's immigration judges, correct? Is there a judge who gives final approval on a green card, a visa, or permanent residence?
Good question. So there are immigration judges, but they're not immigration judges that deal with these cases.
Okay.
Immigration judges are administrative law judges, meaning that they apply for a job just like you and I would apply for a job. And if they get the job as a judge, they would preside over proceedings in the immigration court, which is where people are being deported.
But are they a real judge?
They're a real judge. Okay. They wear a robe. They have a courtroom, and it's
and they're all former attorneys.
Correct.
Okay.
Not always immigration lawyers, but they're all attorneys.
Yep.
So in a case like Chris, or where you're applying for a green card, you would, if there is an interview, you would be interviewed by an officer of Citizenship and Immigration Services, which used to be called INS, or the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
And now it's not.
No, now it's considered, or now it's called Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's no longer called
Immigration Naturalization Service.
That changed after 9/11 when the Department of Homeland Security was created and INS was taken out of the Department of Justice, put in the Department of Homeland Security. The name was changed and different agencies were created.
Understood.
So no judges in a case like Chris's, and in a lot of employment-based immigration cases, you're not even interviewed.
Really?
Yeah, your case is
just like someone like you would put together the whole case for her, and she might not even have to go see anybody?
Correct. So we put together a nice application, and that's on the green card side. On the non-immigrant side, they're always going to be interviewed because they need the visa stamp and their passport at the U.S. consulate.
Okay.
So on the green card side of things, we put together the case, nice color presentation, photographs, all that good stuff, and then we send it in. There may or may not be an interview. If someone has a past transgression, a minor criminal offense, there always will be an interview. Sometimes when celebrities are interviewed, I really do think that it's purposeful because the officers just want to meet them. So every time we go to the immigration service, people are like, who you got, who's here today? And what's real cool is that the celebrities or athletes, in my experience, always go out of their way to really spend time with the officers. Sometimes they'll bring little swag. If it's under $20, then
it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Right. So
of course they want to meet him. Yeah. And why wouldn't you? Sure, I'll meet him.
Yeah. So
you just sign me off. I'll come say hi.
Yeah. Of course. So
again, let's get back to approximately how long can something like that take?
From start to finish, so from non-immigrant to green card can take realistically about 2 years.
Wow.
Once you get your green card, that if it's through employment, you have to wait 4 years and 9 months before you can apply for citizenship. Law says 5 years, but also in the law says you can apply 3 months early. So you have to have your green card for 5 years in order to apply to become an American citizen. So it takes time.
So minimum 7 years.
Correct.
From when you get your first visa to get your green card to be able to apply for citizenship.
Correct.
And then once you actually do the application for citizenship, I mean, what's the minimum to maximum that can actually take?
On average, right now, it probably takes 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit less in Orange County. Orange County was the fastest jurisdiction in the country. And because they were so fast and other jurisdictions a little bit slower.
They were taking up other people's work now?
Yeah. So they inherited work from across the nation, which
That's
created
terrible.
a backlog in Orange County.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good explanation and a good introduction of what you do. We're going to go to another spot real quick. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about current events with Richard Wilner, immigration attorney extraordinaire. Welcome back to American Animals. Richard Wilner is hanging out with us, immigration attorney from Wilner and O'Reilly. Is it Wilner and O'Reilly Associates? Is that what we call it?
Wilner and O'Reilly, a professional law corporation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There was no associates. I just imagined the associates part.
No, we have 12 associates. It's just not in the name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We just got up to date with how Richard got a start in law in general, going through maritime law and now coming into immigration law and having his own practice with him and his partner. And 14 attorneys now total, or 14 under you guys?
14 total, including my partner.
And we also got up to date with some of the bigger clients he's had. Man, Babalu, Manny Pacquiao, Chris Cyborg, among many others. Now we're gonna let's catch up to where we are in today's news. There's an absolute panic and hysteria going on in America with all green card holders, immigrants, people with visas. They're all thinking that they're gonna have problems coming up. Now, let's get to the facts. So let's be real basic. So President Trump's executive order put a temporary hold on immigrants and refugees from 7 Middle Eastern and African countries, correct?
Correct. So there was a temporary ban on persons trying to enter the United States
90 days.
for 90 days if they were from a certain country. Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, the Sudan,
Syria?
Libya, and Syria.
Correct.
In addition to that, he put a 120-day ban on the admission of Syrian refugees. Now, whether you're from one of the 7 for the 90-day ban or a Syrian refugee on the 4-month ban, there were exceptions or an exception built into the executive order phrased as a national waiver or national interest waiver.
So somebody like a Gegard Mousasi, who's fighting in the UFC, he's an Iranian citizen.
He was born in Iran, but he
Dutch.
is a Dutch citizen.
But would they be able to file like a waiver for him to be an exception?
I believe so. One of the problems.
Hey, Dana knows Mr. Trump, so he
Dana
can
knows
handle
waivers. Yeah.
And wait, real quick, I just thought of it. I imagine you've hung out with Mr. Trump.
No.
You never hung out with Bob Lou when he was with Trump?
No.
Because Bob Lou told me he went to the office and stuff when they were in New York promoting Affliction.
At Trump's office? No.
Yeah.
You're getting him confused with Tommy Hilfiger.
No. He told me. He told me for sure.
Yeah, maybe he did tell me that.
Remember Trump was in the Affliction fights in the cage.
Yeah.
He was in the ring promoting the fight. So,
No, I wasn't there.
Okay.
But
let's backtrack to you.
So one problem that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals identified in their order.
Let's frame this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Let's go back. Now, those 7 countries were from a previous list from the Obama administration because he had either put those countries on a list of countries to be concerned about, or didn't he also put a temporary ban on those countries?
He suggested a ban. My understanding, and I'm not sure I'm accurate on this, but I read something the other day because I've heard the talk of that these 7 countries were proposed by former President Obama. However, I read something the other day that said, no, he didn't name these countries by name except for Syria.
I believe that those 7 countries on the travel ban were from a previous list from the previous administration. They didn't just come with those countries on their own.
Right. And that's what I had heard up until the point of the article that I read, that it was only Syria. But either way, yeah, these countries weren't just pulled out of thin air. There was reason to enter, or reason to believe that these countries, nationals of these countries, should be banned for 90 days.
Yeah.
Unless you could demonstrate why you should be allowed to come in during that 90-day ban. Similarly, with Syrian refugees, there's wording in the ban that says if you are leaving to escape religious persecution or you're a religious minority or an ethnic minority,
can we explain?
You still can come in.
Can we explain what a refugee is compared to a migrant or an immigrant?
So a refugee is someone who
is escaping, like you said.
Traditionally it refers to someone who would be escaping persecution, civil war from a country that would be war-torn like Syria, and if someone is a refugee, they have no place to go back to. They're virtually homeless, or in the law, it's called stateless.
Yep.
So if you become a refugee, you have no place to go back to.
Understood.
So,
and then is there a difference between migrant and immigrant?
No.
That's basically the same thing?
A migrant would be taken from the word immigrant and would refer to someone who's coming to the United States. Traditionally, the term migrant would normally be associated with a migrant worker, someone who is coming to the United States to work.
Now, in your professional experience, now there has been multiple bans and temporary bans in the past 15, 20 years with multiple administrations before this, right? Obama, Clinton, and Bush have all put temporary bans on people from Iran as far back as Jimmy Carter, correct?
Right. There's always been some sort of ban or as affecting the Middle East in one form or another, or additional reporting requirements. After 9/11, there are requirements that nationals of specific countries, and I forget the acronym that referred to the process, but they had to report to the Immigration Service and actually do retinal scans. There was not much talk about that. There's not much talk about, as you brought up, bans in the past or concerns in the past as there is right now. And the reason is, in my opinion, and as decided by the court, which we get to in a minute, because of President Trump's comments on the campaign trail of banning Muslims, the media ran with that idea. And the court, for the first time, used statements made on the campaign trail. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals used promises made on the campaign trail to substantiate their decision to not allow the ban to,
which is unprecedented.
Never happened from what the constitutional law scholars say.
And from what I've read and what I've understood, that the court kind of overstepped because they're inserting their opinion as far as not the legality of it, but their opinion on like the ethics of it more, right? They should only be deciding, is the president allowed to make this decision? Not, is this decision a good decision?
They should have, before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals so the case started at the district court where the state of Washington went into court.
Of all random places, right? I mean, and those people must have gone judge shopping, right? They went and found a judge that put an injunction on that.
Well, yeah, the state of Washington came in and said this ban cannot take place because it's harming the state of Washington, because there's a number of people that work at our state universities that are not allowed to come in, nationals of these countries. So it's causing us loss of revenue, hurting our students.
Could there really be a whole bunch of Syrian and Iranian employees of the state of Washington University?
All it takes is one,
I guess.
And the court found that they had standing to assert this claim, and then the state of Minnesota joined them in asserting that claim.
Wow.
State of Minnesota, I learned, has the largest Muslim population in the United States, either in general or from African countries.
I think African countries, because a lot of Somalians in
Minnesota. Sudanese.
And a lot of Hmong people in Minnesota.
They like the weather there.
I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I mean, I'm a Viking, and I don't want to be in that weather. Why would somebody from Africa or Southeast Asia want to be in Minneapolis? I'm not sure. So real quick, I'm looking at a list, Richard. I'm looking at a list of Obama's actions. I mean, I see like 8 of them here. July 25th, 2011, barred those under a UN travel ban or who broke 29 executive orders covering transactions with terrorists. August 4, 2012, banned anybody involved in war crimes or just about any other crime, including human rights violations, from coming to America. April 23rd, 2012, barred anybody helping Syria or Iran or involved in human rights abuses from those governments. Also in 2012, blocked anybody from Iran. So, I mean, we've had all these presidents have instituted some sort of bans or temporary bans before.
Yeah, I don't know about all administrations, but under President Obama, the general consensus is that the Democratic Party is good for immigration and Republicans are bad.
Yeah.
That's the general consensus. And regardless of where you may fall politically, it's just not true. The only president to have ever passed or got an amnesty passed or a massive legalization passed was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was
the last one you would think who did it.
Pretty conservative guy before my time in terms of practicing law, but Ronald Reagan was able to get that done because he was, according to my information, he was able to convince labor unions, who are traditionally Democratic, able to convince labor unions that the granting of an amnesty was not going to take away, your stereotypical blue-collar jobs. Instead, It was going to create them and naturally create dues-paying union members. The money that was to be received from the filing fees for that program, the amnesty program back in the 80s, was meant to be used to secure borders as well as to crack down on employers who were continuing to employ illegal aliens.
Understood. Now let's clear the air here a little bit. You talked about you have people who have visas or green cards. You said from New Zealand, for example. Now this has absolutely zero effect on anybody who is not from one of these 7 countries that has been named.
Correct. Zero legal effect.
Anybody else has nothing to currently worry about right now.
Correct.
Now let's move on to the other side of this. Now we're talking about lately in the news we see ICE has been quote unquote cracking down and deporting some people that were really let go before. So let's give us a little backup. Until recently, from what I told here in Southern California, there's been almost no deportation or really anything for people who don't have a legal status in this country to worry about. I mean, really, people basically had a free pass.
Yeah.
I'd
say there's people in immigration court, for example, and if you're in immigration court, the government's trying to deport you. You may have some people who are in deportation proceedings who at the end of the day are really, really, really good people. Salt of the earth people, family men and women. They're looking to provide a better life for their families. No crimes, anything, but they're here unlawfully. Okay. Somehow they wound up in proceedings.
How would they wind up in that court?
They could have been working at a place where the employer got caught and ICE found them there and then they got arrested.
But I thought we just said that there really hasn't been much enforcement until recently.
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So enforcement in the terms of having to go through the process, yes. Enforcement in the terms of seeing the process through and actually making sure someone ends up in their home country, no. Because, and I don't know what the reasoning is other than the economics of enforcement or the economics of trying to administer a court, there's so many people in court that may have not had any relief that they could apply for. The government lawyers who represent ICE, it's called chief counsel. So assistant chief counsel would agree to exercising its prosecutorial discretion and administratively close the case. What that means is someone who otherwise has no right to be in the United States is allowed to be here. They don't have legal status. And
we just don't make you leave, basically.
We just don't make you leave. That's different than someone who is convicted of a crime, because if someone is convicted of a crime, depending upon the nature of the crime, they may be housed at a facility that has what's called an immigration hearing program, an IHP, which means that there's an actual immigration judge on site that would conduct a hearing at the jail, and someone would remain in custody, complete their criminal sentence. Ideally, the immigration case would have been done by that time. And then if it's a serious felon who would be subject to mandatory detention, no bond on the immigration side of things, they would then get deported. They would get escorted out of the country.
Now, why do we hear about all the time about people who don't have legal status of any kind and they're committed felonies and they're released back on the streets here? Now we hear about that. Is that a real thing?
It's a real thing. It's a real thing because of economics.
How could I don't understand? I mean, explain that to me, someone who doesn't understand that world. How could it possibly be that somebody is not here legally, has committed a violent crime, a felony, and we put them back on the streets of America?
So it depends on the nature of the crime. But what would happen is someone may book into the state system. Someone gets arrested for, I don't know, domestic violence. Someone who's not legal in the United States. Someone books into the state system, and then the local jail or the state jail would traditionally, or I'm sorry, let me back up. Someone books in, They go through the process. They're identified as someone who is not lawfully present in the United States. Then the Immigration Service would put a hold on them. Over the years, there's been developments between state and federal law enforcement in what's called secure communities, where years ago, those holds would be honored. Not so anymore, where they say, you can come and get him if you want, but we're not going to hold him any longer than we have to. Immigration is your problem.
Because jails are so overpacked.
I presume it's a matter of space for bodies. I don't know why else they would.
And funding, I'm sure, too.
Funding, politics, you name it.
So basically, the state and local authorities are not communicating that well with ICE or working or cooperating with ICE?
Yes, all of the above. So,
is it because they don't want to, or it's just the way the system is set up right now, it's not designed to be integrated very well?
No, I think it's designed to be integrated. I don't know if it's a matter of them not wanting to, but sometimes I actually think it is, depending upon the city that you're dealing with, depending upon the state that you're dealing with. You might have conflict between, state politicians and federal politicians and just general ideas. I don't think most jails are going to release a serious violent felon that they've determined to be a danger to society. But what can happen, and what does happen, and this is what one of the newer executive orders was designed to address, these guys may go through the process. These guys may get deported. If they happen to be from Mexico, they get taken to the other side of the border, the doors open, and they go, goodbye.
Yeah. Now,
well, they're back here the next night.
And explain that. Are people just straight released, or are they released to Mexican authorities?
Straight released. Depends on the country. But my understanding is in Mexico, they're straight released, or they might
just
have
right
to,
under the street.
Yeah, they might have to, sign in at the little kiosk south of the border, and then they're good to go.
Now, what about people from other countries in Central America, South America? Do we actually ship those people all the way to their country?
We do.
And I'm curious.
Airplanes.
So we use government planes, or we buy them a ticket?
No, commercial.
We buy them a ticket on United.
We buy them a ticket on United, and an immigration officer would accompany them. Sometimes they board the plane first, sometimes, or meaning the person who's being deported. Sometimes they may board the plane first before the other commercial passengers get on. Sometimes they may be the last one on board.
Wow.
But immigration officers will accompany them to their homeland. Sometimes you'll have an officer from a sister agency, DEA, ATF, whatever, that can put in for OT or just, they don't volunteer to do it. They're getting paid to do it. But to accompany them to their homeland, and depending upon the country, they may be surrendered to those authorities. It's also a basis where they could apply for relief. If you're getting deported to Iran, for example, Iran won't accept guys back. Or if you're from a country where the guy can prove that they're going to be tortured upon their return by the government officials that they're surrendered to, then it's a basis for relief in court. Don't send me back.
And that's a big problem, because a lot of people, when they're taken into custody by ICE here now, say, well, I'm going to face some kind of torture or tyranny or punishment if I go home, right?
Correct.
Okay. Real quick, there's a lot of great information. I really like it. We're going to go to one more spot. We'll be back. We're going to finish up with Richard Wilner. You give us some more time?
Sure.
10, 15 minutes?
Yep.
Okay. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to American Animals. We're going to wrap up here, learning all kinds of great stuff about a big thing in the news these days. We talk about a lot of sports, MMA, UFC, pop culture in general, but it's always fun to learn about some stuff, and we're learning about some great immigration laws and the regulations and how things work out here with Richard Wilner. Richard, thanks again for joining us, and hey,
my pleasure.
Thanks for signing on as a new sponsor with us. We're going to get you guys started next week, and we're going to talk about, at the end of this, we'll talk about how you can help people and how athletes and people who are listening to our show, fighters, MMA people, or people who just want to come here or want to stay here can use your services. So we're talking about people being deported or sent back. We actually pay for their tickets, and it reminded me, did you see in the news this week, Angela Merkel, because Germany has millions of refugees coming from Syria and who knows where. They're, originally they were so left-wing and liberal towards these migrants and refugees, and now the public is really starting to turn on her, and her approval ratings have gone in the toilet. She's looking at in losing the next election. Germany is now offering money to immigrants and refugees who leave. They're offering checks. We'll pay you if you go somewhere else.
I think it was a large, it's interesting how it relates to the political climate here and to different countries. It was in large part, I think, responsible for Brexit.
Yeah, of course.
And and it's a big.
And France and Germany are going to be next.
It's a big deal.
There's a hard right-wing conservative party in France. I think it's Le Pen is the lady's name. That I'm sure her name is something Le Pen. She's in the lead right now. And she's hardcore. Yeah, like she's hardcore right-wing.
It's potentially a big problem, if for no other reason, because of security threats.
I wouldn't say it's potentially a big problem. Have you seen the videos of the streets of Paris and stuff? There's literally tens of thousands of refugees living on the streets of Paris, on the sidewalks, and they're having gang fights and riots. It's not potentially a problem.
It is a problem.
It's a big problem in Europe. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe. I've talked to people who said, like, you just don't want to go there right now. You want to avoid it. So getting back to the way things work here, it's really interesting to learn that there are cases of people who have no legal status here, who are felons, but they are released back to the street because the state and local authorities are not working with ICE, with the federal authorities, because of politicians in those cities or states.
Yeah, or reasons unbeknownst to me. But a guy may, at the beginning of the criminal process, when a guy gets arrested by local law enforcement and then transported to a state or county jail, he would book in, go through the process, and may be identified and put in the system as someone who is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident of the United States, and ICE may put a hold on that guy. This guy, if there's no ICE hold, this guy may post bond and he's out fighting the criminal process, not the immigration process, but fighting the criminal process on the street. There is an ICE hold that used to prevent bond from being issued, but now they may the state authorities in some cities no longer recognize those holds because they say it's your problem, not ours. We're not trying to get involved in immigration enforcement. We have enough to do. So
and why?
But if I can just add, in my opinion, there's not a willing release of convicted felons onto the street who are not lawful in the United States. It may be going on. That's not what I'm trying to say. You do hear about it. You do hear about convicted felons who are not legal in the United States that may have and probably were already deported, but then they just sneak back in.
Yeah.
And these are guys who are being rounded up. This is what's been on the news. This is when you see people standing in front of ICE vans that have rounded these people up, which is shocking to me. Shocking that people can articulate factual base. Maybe a person may have reformed their life. However, they still stand convicted of an offense for which they were deported for, or they never had to leave, or they left and snuck back in. And we have people protesting in the streets over it.
Yeah, so tell me, that takes my next question. Tell me, how particularly frustrating and angering is it for someone like you who spends, better part of a decade or more, every day you are working to help people do the right thing and do things properly, and then to see people who are out here not making any attempt to sync with our system and to fill out the proper paperwork and pay the correct fees, and they're just demanding the same status as the people you're working with every day trying so hard for?
Good question. And I mean, on a personal level, it bothers me. I like to see people do it right. And, the struggle is real, so to speak. It's not easy to do it right. It can be expensive to do it right. And sometimes there's actually no way to do it right, So
yeah, that's another question I have. Yeah. Other than the legal fees for the person that helps you, what type of fees are involved for a green card, visa, green card? And
it depends on the case. It could be a couple $1,000s per step. It just depends on the case. But sometimes there's nothing that can be done. And if you look at where we're at in Orange County in Southern California, the demographics a little bit different. In that I tell people I'm an immigration lawyer, and they automatically think that my clients are all illegals that happen to be from Mexico. That's not my client base.
Those people can't afford me.
Well, they could, but that's for one reason or another. It's just not my market.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, if you're some guy living just south of the border and you can see the city lights of San Diego, and you got a kid who's crying himself to sleep because he's hungry, and if you can make it across that line and your life's going to drastically improve overnight, so is your wife and your kids. I mean, what do? Do you not do it because it's not right?
Well, I think we all understand. I mean, any and all Americans, no matter what nationality you are, you have to understand that there is and was such a thing as the American dream.
Right.
Now, it all comes down to, in my opinion, How long can that go on? Like, how long can our country just say, come on in? At what point are we, hey, we're getting full, we're in debt, there's only so much we can do. And at what point do you have to say, look, it's not everybody on this planet's God-given right to be allowed to come to America?
Yeah. And what people don't realize is the economic impact of illegal immigration is staggering.
Legal immigration or
illegal immigration is staggering. Hospitals and border hospitals, in towns that are either border towns or close to the border, go out of business because they can't turn away someone who's seeking medical attention, but you also need to get paid for that, and they don't get paid, and they shut their doors.
Yeah.
General wear and tear on infrastructure, on roads and things that would traditionally be financed by tax dollars. And some illegals actually pay tax, but for the most part, it's a big impact on our society. And my point in asking the question about what do you do is, you're right. There is a certain side of it that says we can understand and you doing what you do. On the other hand, it doesn't make you any less compassionate as an individual to want to be able to secure our borders, because that's what we have to do.
Yeah, real quick, let's give it a second. We have a few minutes to go. It's funny, I hear about all these people talking about if Trump wins, I'm going to go to Canada. Canada's immigration laws are much, much more difficult than ours, correct?
Well, they're different.
But you have to show a lot more. You have to have a certain amount of money in the bank.
Correct.
You have to have a job.
So Canada, contrary to popular opinion, doesn't admit everyone, and they're actually quite strict in who they admit. If, like, as an American, we can just go into Canada, but if you have a DUI, for example, misdemeanor DUI, you're not getting in absent a waiver. And so they're pretty strict in that, and good for them. They actually regulate their borders. Canada's immigration system is a point system, and you're 100% right. You accumulate points based on your education, based on money in the bank, based on who your family is, based on what you're trying to do there. So it's pretty weird if the numbers add up saying, hey, we're going to allow educated rich people to come to Canada. It's like, hey, you're smart, Canada.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then also, look, the other side of our border, Mexico, from what I read, if they catch people who are not of legal status, like Central Americans, Guatemalans, Hondurans, they get punished pretty severely.
Correct.
They get caught there. And also, not just that, but the Mexicans aren't very happy with those people in their country. They don't want them there either.
Correct.
And you look at some other countries like Japan. Japan doesn't allow
strict,
almost no immigrants and zero refugees. Israel's another country. I mean, there's like 20 or 30 different countries. If you have that passport, you just don't come to Israel. You're not allowed.
Well, I think if you have an Israeli stamp in your passport,
you also can't go to
another other country.
But I don't think Israel lets a lot of people in either.
Well, Israel actually has a history of accepting refugees, though.
They do.
Yeah. Oh. Traditionally Jewish refugees, but
but I'm talking about from Muslim countries. They're not allowing like the average Saudi Arabian or Egyptian to come over to Israel just because.
I think the average Saudi Arabian or Egyptian probably would look for someplace else to go.
I don't think so too. Yeah. So real quick, let's wrap it up. Richard's been a lot of good information. Tell us how people can contact your business. How can they find you on social media? How can they find you guys? And tell us how you can help both people who are athletes, or the average person who wants to use your services.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me today. It's been great. Like I said, I was looking forward to see Ian. I was hoping that today we were going to change the name to 3 American Animals, but without him being here, I guess
you're the second one today.
We're two. So I'll stick with that. So the name of our firm is Wilner & O'Reilly. We have 7 offices. We have a couple in Utah. We have a couple in Northern California. We just opened up in Idaho. And then we have 2 in Southern California. Best way to find us is on our website, which is wilneroreilly.com.
And we'll post it on our Facebook and Twitter.
Our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram is all Wilner & O'Reilly, or you can just go the old school way and Google us.
Yeah. We'll make sure we link in all of our social media, guys.
And thank you. In terms of how we can help, it's like this. At the end of the day, we can tell you if it can be done, or we'll tell you if it can't be done. At the end of the day, when you speak to a lawyer that's a member of our team, you'll get honest advice. And like I said, if it can be done, great. We'll tell you we can do it, how long it'll take, and what it'll cost. If we can't do it, we'll tell you, don't let someone take your money because it can't be done.
Yeah.
So,
honest and fair is the best thing we can ask for, especially somebody who's as important to us as an attorney trying to help us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Richard, thank you so much for the information.
Honestly,
I loved all the info. I'm glad our listeners are getting some up-to-date information on current events. You guys, thanks for listening to us. Episode number 30 of American Animals. Ian McCall will be back next week. And we'll be on YouTube next week.
This podcast was a presentation of LightUpMedia.fm.
Mother to get his beautiful face on here. Thanks for checking us out, guys. Remember, at 2 American Animals, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Find our Patreon, find our YouTube, and 2AmericanAnimals.com. We'll see you later.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.